Now, in an upcoming BBC documentary, Prince William has opened up about how becoming a father brought back the emotions and grief he felt after his mother, Princess Diana, died when he was just a teenager. I mean, it's a very upsetting topic, actually, Judi, and I know certainly you can relate to an awful lot of what Prince William has been through.
Yes, when I, thinking about this documentary and hearing what it says, it does definitely make me reflect. And I felt like, at the age of my children turning, like my daughter turning 10 and my son turning 9, I started to have anxiety and I wasn't really sure what it was. But then I remembered, at the age of like 9, my mum had her first stroke and it was an aneurysm, which is quite severe, a blood vessel in your brain burst. And she had that in front of me and, she was just cooking, making cakes for the school. And I just remember her saying to me, get me some water. And she drank the water. I was an innocent 9-year-old child and she drank it fast. And I was like, oh, do you want to play a game? I can drink faster than you. And then, she just collapsed. And that moment of her saying to me, I love you, go and get some help. Don't be scared. And she started to, read a Bible scripture, like read it out loud. So I knew there was something wrong. And that affected me for so many years. Like there was a point where I couldn't even talk about it. So once I had a child and, I looked at the child and I thought, I'm a mom and everything was fine. But then when my daughters got to the age of 9, I started to have anxiety and I realized it was the effects of nearly losing my mum at the age of 9 years old and thinking to myself, if I get a headache, am I okay? Am I having the same thing as what my mum had? I just want to live to be able to see my kids past the age of 9 and 10. And then it calmed down, once my daughter got to like 12. And then my son last year, he turned 10 and I started to have the same kind of anxiety again, like if I've got a headache or, am I going to be around? And I really understand what he's saying in regards to having your own children and then feeling certain traumas that you thought may have been resolved or things that have happened in your life as a young child, and it comes back up again when you're now in that reverse role where you are the parent.
Judi, when that happened when you were 9, which is just must have been, one can't even imagine how frightening that must have been. Were you on your own and what happened?
I was actually on my own and I can feel myself shaking now. I was actually on my own and my mum was making cakes for the school. And I just remember her looking at me and saying, get me some water. And, innocent child got the water, gave it to her. She drank it so fast. My mum was a very prim and proper woman. So when she drank that water and it started to trickle down her mouth where she was just trying to drink so fast, I thought to myself, what's going on? And then she just started to sweat. And I just remember feeling like, Mum, are you okay? And she just, it's as we're parents, that look that you would give your child. Yeah.
Did you know how to call an ambulance, Judi?
Do you know what? I didn't. But if I'll be honest with you, when she, by that time, struggled to the chair and was like almost like collapsing on the floor, and I knew it was serious. And I tell you what's really sad. I knew it was serious because my dad turned up. Yeah, after I called the ambulance, I've gone a bit ahead of myself. I wasn't sure how to call the ambulance, but what I did do is I ran out the corridor and there was these red little Wellington boots that my mum had bought me that I wasn't allowed to wear because they were for a trip the next week, but I put them on. In the midst, and this is how innocent children are. In the midst, my mum was actually dying. If I be honest with you, my mum was dying. She went into cardiac arrest. And I was putting on these little Wellington boots in the innocence of that 9 years old. And I ran and got the neighbours. And the neighbour came. And I remember when the neighbour came in, they just grabbed me and took me to the side. I don't remember seeing anything after that because obviously she must have been going into cardiac arrest. And they grabbed me and put me to the side. And they did all the calling, the 999. And it was like in a minute, I just remember I was shaking, this uncontrollable shake that I still can get this shake if I'm nervous. Like when my son was sick a few years back, I got that same shake. And the moment I realised this is really serious, when I should feel most protected, my dad turned up. I didn't grow with my dad. So when he turned up and his eyes was red from crying, I was like, okay, something is really wrong. That's when I was like, is mum okay? Like, is mum gonna die? And you know, having children and them going through the age of 9 and 10, the anxiety just really started to kick in. The heart palpitations, not being able to sleep at night, any little pain or twinge in my body, just concerned that, am I going to go down the same route? I just don't want to leave my kids, especially as a single parent. That's what definitely was coming through my mind. But they've got through those ages. And I'm not going to lie, there's still moments I just get that nervous feeling, because I'm like, I grew with a sick parent and she was a single parent. And my prayers is always, you know, let me live long and healthy so that I can be there for my children when they're older and they've got grandkids, and I can be there for them.
Judi, you know, and this is why this documentary that Prince William's doing is so important, because listening to you, what strikes me more than anything are all the tiny little details that are still at the forefront of your mind. You know, it wasn't even necessarily how you felt in the moment. It was the little things as a child that has gone into your memory bank, with the red boots and you know,
I'm putting on the boots that I'm not allowed to put
you know,
on.
It's those little moments that now make sense when we talk about having your own children, potentially opening up this door of trauma that, like we say, Prince William has actually spoken a lot about this in this new documentary. Like we say, it's on later on. You're reminded he's human.
I love,
you know?
I love Prince William, and I love Harry, and of course he's just had a baby, and it may well have, you know, I'm sure triggered the same responses. What I think is great about this documentary is the fact that it's addressing male postnatal illness in a way. As someone who suffered so severely with postnatal depression and was hospitalised, obviously it's a topic that I've talked about for 30 years, and there's many issues as to whether or not the origins are hormonal, which they were in my case, but for some people it's psychological. And I didn't really think, you know, 30 years ago that men had postnatal depression. And of course they do. But people always thought that it wasn't hormonal, but now they're finding that things like childhood trauma that Prince William is talking about can actually reduce testosterone levels and produce a complete deficit in the cortisol as well. So actually there can be hormonal areas to it. When Lincoln, my husband, had a child, he was only 19 when he had Lewis. And the only way that he ever says that he can relate to my anxiety issues is when he remembers having this child. Now, obviously, you're going to say, well, you're going to feel incredibly vulnerable at having a child when you're a child yourself. But it was because Lincoln lost his dad when he was 14. His dad dropped down dead. His dad was only 42. And he said this overwhelming thing of, I have to be here for this child. He said, took him down a dark, dark rabbit hole. And of course, as well, the attention is on the baby and is on the mother. And we're looking for the mother's physical health, the mother's mental health, and the baby. And dad is kind of expected just to be there to pick up and carry everything.
And how ill Catherine was. She had that awful syndrome. She was just sick. No, it was the morning sickness, that all-day morning sickness. And so that would have been very different. So the focus would have been so much on her as well.
Absolutely, and then especially with the lives that they lead particularly. So I think it's something, you know, I worked very much with a guy called Mark Williams who set up a postnatal depression group for men, and I remember there was lots of people very cynical about it at the time. This is years ago when I was you know, doing the rounds, talking about it and stuff. And he said he couldn't believe the people. There's 1 in 10 men really say, and of course, men and their mental health, it's only now that we're creating a platform. And I think this show does this very well, to get men like Mark to talk, like your Mark, who are talking now about mental health. So I think this is fantastic, and especially in that macho area of football as well.
Oh, no,
I think now, you know, we're talking about this, I think Mark could have been a bit triggered after the girls, definitely. I mean, he sort of came to the fore when they were about 1, both times actually. And I wonder if that was a bit of a postnatal, because of course he wasn't diagnosed with depression then. I think obviously clearly he was depressed for years before he was. And I'm going to have a big conversation with him about that.
Tim used to, of course, they're saying that there are higher cases if the wife is poorly, whether or not that's physically poorly or mentally poorly. And Tim says that he had to be there for me, and he used to go out into the garden and scream at the top of his lungs, come in and carry on with carry on, because he couldn't let me see that he was struggling as well.
He could get
so I'm not saying that that's postnatal illness as such, but it's certainly an area that I think should be talked about more.
Label,
it doesn't have to be a label.
Emotional pain, and that's what we do talk about on here, is that men have to suppress so much, and I think that that's a really clear example of how men are supposed to be this, man up, look
and
after
I think
the
that's
woman.
with I know it's controversial, but with Prince Harry, I think he's made decisions for his own mental health and that of his that of his wife, and you know how I feel. I'm a supporter of that.
Brilliant that Prince William's spoken about. I do. Absolutely brilliant, because that will really allow so many other men to recognise that in themselves.
Definitely.
And like you say, Denise, maybe in terms of Harry as well, just what having the little baby has done,
of course,
to his mind, where
the trauma that kid went through, both those children went through.
Yeah.
And he's chosen another route for his own.
No wonder he felt so protective.
Yeah.
It does make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Judi, thank you so much for talking about that, because it's not easy kind of, reliving those moments. Honestly, that was really powerful.
It's definitely not easy, and if anybody watches this and feels they've been triggered, and just get the support. And I think obviously having platforms like this where you do allow people to really reflect and know that it's okay to ask for help or to speak to somebody about anything that might have happened traumatic in your life when you was a child is really important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judi. And of course, there are lots of helplines as well on our website as well.